ILM opened its doors to the outside film community, becoming the first independent visual effects studio to realize the visions of directors with unique stories to tell.
First film I collaborated with ILM on was Raiders of the Lost Ark. Most of the effects of Raiders came at the end when they opened the Ark of the Covenant. And the effects involved, creating the power of God, I guess, of what was coming out of the actual Ark. The spirits. There were a lot of challenges posed. I mean, I wanted the scene where the one bad Nazi's face kind of implodes, and where Tote's head melts, and where Belloq's head explodes. I didn't know how to do this, and I just left it to these guys that had done Star Wars. I figured, well, if they could do Star Wars, they could certainly melt a head. And they did figure out how to melt this wax head they built. It was kind of genius. And that was all the beginnings of my relationship with ILM.
While ILM continued to push the boundaries of photochemical effects, George Lucas could see the potential for an entirely new way of creating cinema magic.
In the same way George had so much vision about marrying computers to cameras and optical printers, he felt that there were probably ways to create all of the kinds of things he did in Star Wars in the computer. He felt there were ways to do editing with computers. He thought there were ways to create and manipulate music with computers. And those three things led him to start the Lucasfilm Computer Graphics division that he hired Ed Catmull to start.
I was asked to bring in technologists and computer scientists and wizards of various sorts to bring this into this industry.
Among PhD student Ed Catmull's early advancements in computer technology was the ability to create smooth curved surfaces and wrap textures around them. This was a pioneering leap in the rudimentary world of computer graphics, known as CG.
I think their charter was to make a system that might be able to make images, ultimately images on the film that looked photoreal.
And in the process of that, the Apple came out, and Dennis Muren had said, gee, could I take 6 months off and just learn how to use this Apple? So he was the one that first put his foot in the water and learned what the Ed and the guys were doing. And then that started the link so that I could transfer the technology that the computer division was developing over into ILM, which is where it was meant to be.
It was a very risky thing, certainly, for George to fund this, and also very visionary because it all really did pay off.
Today's powerful computer-generated imagery owes its roots to this early CG group, who by 1982 were able to prove their various skills to create a sequence in Star Trek, Wrath of Khan. While developing hardware and software, they spent 5 months advancing texture mapping, motion blur, digital matte painting, and compositing programs to create the first visual effects shot made in the computer for a motion picture.
It was mind-blowing for the time. I mean, now, of course, it looks old-fashioned. But it was part of earning the way in.
And the minute Dennis Muren saw the types of things that could be done in computer graphics, it led to Dennis using computer graphics to create the stained glass man in Young Sherlock Holmes.
Dennis came over to us and said, why don't we try it in computer animation? And this was very innovative and very forward-thinking. It was really exciting. I mean, it was a lot of work because back in the day we didn't have the tools. I literally had to take the footage and project it onto my computer screen, and I animated the camera move by hand. I don't know if I've ever worked harder on 6 shots in my life, but it was worth it because when Young Sherlock Holmes came out, people who worked in the special effects industry had no idea how it was done.
The Stained Glass Knight was the first computer-generated character in a motion picture, and the film was nominated for an Academy Award for Best Visual Effects, a testament to the growing impact of computer technology. ILM's work in stop-motion animation and optical effects would advance further into the digital realm with George's next movie, a fantasy epic he asked Ron Howard to direct.
Dennis Muren called George and I over to his office there at ILM, and he said, We're beginning to use computers to work with film digitally, the first time I ever, heard that phrase used, to sort of blend film images. So there was this one transformation that we needed to make in the movie. I assumed we'd have to do it the way werewolf transformations had always been done, with dissolves, cuts, and he thought we could do it in one shot, which was a really interesting notion to me. And he said, I can't guarantee it's gonna work, but, it just might. And it was the first morphing shot ever done. And it really was more like the kind of magic that you see on stage, where there's no camera trickery, it just happened. And of course, there was so much technology behind it, and it was all breakthrough stuff. That was amazing for me.
By the late 1980s, the computer was threatening the analog ways of old. The Lucasfilm Computer Group had developed an astounding array of tools that remain today's industry standard. The first digital editing system, the first digital audio editing system, a film laser scanner, and a powerful graphics computer for digital compositing and high-resolution imagery. The Pixar Image Computer and its processing software called RenderMan enabled the group to create a breakthrough computer-animated short film, Andre and Wally B., which inspired them to pursue their far-off goal of a full-length animated feature film.
At the time, as the vagaries for finance come up and down, George realized he couldn't afford all of this because there were so many things going on. And so we had some meetings with George, and we said, well, we really want to make an animated film. And he said, well, that's not what I want to do now. He wanted the technology. So we started down the path of selling off the group to be a separate company, which is what became Pixar.
So we set up our own CG group within ILM instead of Lucasfilm. That's purpose was to do CG work only for films. And it was great. And it took a couple of years or so to really get it going. We did some wire removal stuff, then eventually we did The Abyss.
It was The Abyss that I think, in many ways, put a larger stake in the ground for the notion of digital characters in live-action films created by the computer. It ended up being about 90 seconds of animation. It used a mix of computer graphics and traditional optical compositing techniques, so it was kind of a transitional step.
That was something very new for us. There were not a lot of established procedures for doing any of this work at the time, so we just dove into it and we were making it up as we went along.
It was just so exciting to be able to see that what had been a promise for so long and so difficult to do because nobody had ever done it before. The tools were now in place, the software was in place, the hardware was sort of in place. It was a matter of applying them.
What happened after The Abyss came out was a number of projects that had been sort of circling, needing effects that couldn't have been accomplished before really started to rise up. One of them came out as a direct result of The Abyss, which was Terminator 2. After Jim Cameron felt that we'd successfully created what he wanted for The Abyss with CG animation, he then created a character in Terminator 2 that had to be done in computer graphics.
I think that was the real breakthrough film also for CG. We did all our work with digital compositing for the first time. There's no sign of any sort of matte line around anything or any grain mismatching that used to tip people off to an effect shot. It looked like it was right in the scene. So we've got 52 shots in it, and most of the people I don't think had any idea how we did that work.
In order to create the shape-shifting T-1000 Terminator, ILM employed a revolutionary laser scanning process to capture Robert Patrick's form and expressions that would enable them to animate and model a realistic computer version of the actor.
It was a lot of breakthroughs that we had to do to get that show done, to get the CG to work, all the reflection maps on it, and not have it just rip its geometry apart, and being able to pan the computer camera to match the background live action camera, so we can follow the guy's feet as he's walking across the checkerboard floor, and up from that grows this head. And that was really, really tough stuff to do. You know, it was on the cutting edge.
So everybody in this industry is saying, wow, everything's changing now. So then there's this general awareness that the technology is coming into this industry. So with that film, it made the awareness that something big is coming.